terrible, right? Being at the Gateway Pundit, we're getting censored, we're getting doxxed, we're getting attacked, we're getting sued, all for sharing the truth. We see that there's entities even overseas. Jim mentioned this the other day. Overseas in the UK Parliament, a guy's bragging about having our Google ad service denied. A guy in front of Parliament bragging about that, like this was a good thing. And so we had foreign entities shutting down us, attacking us. We find out the Department of Defense is censoring us through what Matt Gaetz called was the censorship industrial complex, where they're getting paid. The defense is paying some of these entities, some of them overseas in the UK, to censor conservatives. Now, with the revelations of Elon Musk and President Trump, in less than a month in office, we find out that the U.S. aid not only is paying for these entities to censor us, not only is paying for these entities to attack our advertisers, which ultimately that's a really sinister way to shut somebody down. They can't make money. They can't continue to do this, and really reminds me of just the Nazis in Germany and the communist Chinese, et cetera. And so we find out that not only that, but we find out that the U.S. aid is paying Reuters, who I believe is a UK company, I don't even think it's American, $300 million a year to push their narratives. BBC's getting paid millions of dollars a year to push their narrative. Politico, millions. New York Times, millions. The list goes on and on and on. So while we're fighting and struggling, to survive, really getting sued, and by monsters. I mean, huge law firms with hundreds of attorneys, et cetera, coming after us. They're paying sites like New York Times to push this messaging, which it's untrue. It's just not true. So this is what we've survived somehow, and it is a crazy world. It's upside down.
Joe, it reminds me of that. Hold on, of that right there, right? 5GW. What you've talked about, narrative warfare.
Yeah. I tell you, it's been a nightmare. Matt, tell us a bit about yourself as we get started here. What's your history, your background, and how did you end up here today?
Well, 21 years into Uncle Sam's Misguided Children. They're the U.S. Marine Corps. Flew Prowlers, EA-6Bs. Actually helped stand up Guantanamo with the processing for detainees in 2004. Was the chief of staff down there to adjudicate 535 detainees if they were properly classified as enemy combatants. So I know that base very, very well. Matter of fact, the first Cuban sandwich I ever had was in Guantanamo, made by Jamaicans. But that became a whistleblower on Fast and Furious, briefed not to ISA, but to Chaffetz and Gowdy. A lot of time to Senator Grassley's when he was Judiciary Committee chairman, and Jason Foster, who was the lead investigator, and a lot of similarities to what we saw there to what's happening now. We see with the election, and then it was the Sunday after the Tuesday election of 2020. We had met at a hotel here locally with a lot of officials trying to figure out what was going on. We had Matt Schlapp was here, Rick Grinnell was here, a lot of the Republican Party officials, and I began to, two things, realize that the party leadership, in physics there's a term called Brownian motion. There was a lot of activity. There was no vector on what result producing activities are we doing to find out what just happened. I think a lot of us in the military, and Joe, you've seen a lot of veterans who have some skill sets. My background was information warfare, electronic warfare. We saw color revolution type things that we might have been asked on our country's behalf to do to other countries being targeted back to us. Mm-hmm. And then we began to speak up, and through that, we actually out here, February of 2021, We had a kind of a first meeting that we did, and then you were part of the 1 May 2021 event at the Trump Hotel in Vegas, where we had the inaugural Secretaries of State Summit. And I know uh, Christina Caramo, Mark Fincham, Jim Marchant, Sonny Borelli, Senator Mastriano from Pennsylvania. You had remoted in, and we began to coalesce. And then from that period of time, not that something that I think any of us decided to do consciously, I think God directed us into this. We then, became good friends with Mark Cook, Phil Waldron, a lot of the folks in the election integrity, Tina Peters. And we began to then do forums throughout the country. We've done over 41 of them. Mark Cook has been an integral part of that. He's done also separately from that the Hand Count Roadshow, the least of which, the last we just had, Joe, that you moderated for us, where we began to tie together, kicking off the forum with 5GW, right, to give you the blanket of what's happening to you, America. Then we went to the CCP. What the CCP's done, we had Frank Gaffney and Roger Robinson Jr., who helped Reagan craft that strategy to take down the Soviet Union economically. Then we went to the border. We had Victor Avila and we had Jason Jones. And then we spent a whole afternoon on, I like to call it now, election assurance. And it's funny, I look at that journey and all these people who have gotten involved with this, all imperfect people. But my God, how God has taken us all for his perfect plan to unveil all that's been going on. And I see that onion is coming back piece by piece by piece.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've had some real blessings for sure this last month with Trump, and we could talk about that too. But can we go back and revisit what you Fast and Furious? What did you do there, and what did you see there? Because a lot of people, I remember when I first heard it, I'm like, I don't know what that is. It sounds kind of far fetched. I know we don't like Obama, but what's this really all about? Is there really evidence here and that? What was your involvement with all that?
Initially was with my military background to go look at this was 2000. We're going to start in 2006, I believe, to go down to Dallas under the auspices of a meeting, and to met with two agents to look at called Operation Wide Receiver at the time. And I'm a Cowboys fan, so I thought it had to do with football, but it was, I guess, Bush had initially started this effort. So to there, and also to folks at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, with the 160th out there in Fort Campbell, to see the military involvement, and then seeing all the piece parts, and then realizing that it wasn't designed to find out what was going on, what they asked me to do, what was going on, but to curtail the information, to limit the information. So that's when I said, I'm not playing this game. And I started talking to House Oversight and to Senate Judiciary. I remember telling them back then, gosh, it was 2014 where most of the interviews were, that, testimony to them, talk to them, that I said, this is it's one tentacle of a many tentacled hydra. And it's something very, very terrible, I think, in our government, and look at what you saw, how Lara Logan got kicked off CBS. Remember what they did to Cheryl Atkinson, because she broadcast, she had John Dodson, who was a former Army veteran, DEA agent, ATF, and he blew the whistle. And he was told, kind of like General Flynn has told Tina and others, like, go public so you don't have an unfortunate accident. He was advised to go public so he wouldn't have an unfortunate accident. And they threw her off CBS for reporting the truth. What they did to her and her computers. Look at that story. Remember? I mean, government, nation level capability targeted her for reporting the truth. Because if you look at that, what that was, and I testified in here, the National Survival Gun Store, 2,000 weapons just from a gun store here went south of the border. And they went through predominantly Lukeville, Arizona, down Route 2 to Caborca, Mexico, and then on trains to the east coast of Mexico. Remember, we found them in the Bataclan, Tulsi Gabbard. We found Fast and Furious weapons arming the Arab Spring. This was a way to arm the enemies of us, but with our weapons, because And by definition, I'd say it was bipartisan because we didn't use the military. Obama didn't use the military. Holder didn't use the military. They used intelligence forces. And I call it the Congress within the Congress, right? Which is the House leader, Speaker, Majority leader, Minority leader, Minority whip, and then similar on the Senate. So they knew what was going on, and for a while there was a lot of activity. The family of Brian Terry, Brian Terry, a BORTAC agent who more than likely was killed by our own people. And we had a whistleblower who told the family soon after he was killed. And remember, he was brought from Peck Canyon, December of 2010, Peck Canyon up to which is in Arizona by Rio Rico, to the morgue, to the medical examiner's table within 2 hours. Yet full rigor mortis had set in. It's impossible, right? So one of the people BORTAC agents who carried his body out told the family, the government's lying to you. He didn't die. I've got Brian's notes that his family had given me. He was uncovering all of this. He had it secreted under his sole of his boot that his brother found, Ken Terry. And all the mother wanted, Josephine Terry, was the truth, right? What happened to my son? He was a cop. He was a Marine. He was a cop. He was a Border Patrol agent. He was a BORTAC agent. And he gets murdered. Just wanted the truth. And to this day, and then she met, I think, in August of 2019 with President Trump in the East Room after he honored ICE and Border Patrol in the East Room, met her in the Oval Office and told her that Josephine Terry Josie, there's an investigation going on. I'm on top of it. Not that he's running it, but he's on top of it. And it's much bigger than the American people could ever know. And that was validated through the two daughters who were there, Kelly and Michelle. So I could see the ugly underbelly of some folks in our government who used our institutions against us. And then when I saw it in the elections, it began to gel on my head that, wow, this is one of those arms of a many-tentacled hydra.
It's amazing. It's shocking in some extent, and I think it's a human nature to just maybe most Americans are good people. They just can't even understand how evil some of this stuff is because it's really, really dark. And that's kind of been my awakening, I guess, especially even now after January 20th, just to see all that we're seeing and how the government has been paying for this, to me, is just so shocking. It's just it's unbelievable. And then to see the stuff they're paying for. Basically, we've, learned over the last month, not even month, that the U.S. was paying terrorists around the world, terrorists that were fighting U.S. soldiers, probably some terrorists that killed up to 1,000 U.S. soldiers. We found out Boko Haram, that group in Nigeria, was being funded by U.S. aid money. We're finding out that Ukraine, I'm sure, is just full of U.S. aid money. All this stuff around the world that the U.S. was funding. And actually, I saw this comment. I was on a thread with Jim and a couple others, one a former U.S. Congresswoman, and we're like, this is so sad. We all thought that our country was so great, was so special. And I still believe that. But to see what was happening behind the scenes now, and to see how we're funding this, and now not just the attacks around the world, we're seeing it in Ukraine, we're seeing this thing all unfold. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. But also, like I said, the attack against free speech, which I've heard Elon say recently that, this is fundamental. If you don't have free speech, you don't have civilization. And I'd have to agree. It's a God-given, thing. God gives us the ability to speak and think, and when there's efforts to stop that, it's really anti-human and really uncivil. So we've been faced with a lot here, Matt. It's been brutal. Did any of that surprise you? Yeah.
No, from a Fast and Furious perspective, it doesn't surprise me. I was naive in the election process because, for most of my career, you sent an absentee ballot in. I didn't even know that most of the time they weren't even count it. If I'm going to put my life down, the risk for this country, you think you at least count my ballot, please. But what I was going to say is there was a line that John Dodson had said when he was whistleblowing to Charles Atkinson, and he said, "Not that the American people are bad, but some in our government hijack our institutions." And he said, talking about ATF and what they were doing, and sub rosa kind of doing with running weapons to the cartels. He said, I used to think we were the good guys. Now I'm not so sure. And that was a telling moment for him to realize that not that the American people aren't good, but you have people at some of these institutions. And we just seen it with the J6ers. We've seen it with Tina Peters. We've seen it with the elections, that they can take any information, warp it, and turn it against you. And it highlights, I think, in what the VP, he was speaking at CPAC this morning, but what he said over in Germany, when we are friends and we're supposed to have shared values, Europe and America, but when you can't speak your mind, when you can't voice an opposition, when you can't say I'm against something, and you get jailed for posting a meme or forwarding a meme or liking a meme, uh, that is dangerous territory.
Absolutely. It's somebody's, it's people trying to control your being, really, just everything about you, your thinking, what you say. That's just total communism. I think that's the reality, isn't it? We've been living under a communist regime for 4 years, at least. To me, I think it went full commie, full fascist under Biden, and we never even knew who was running the show. But and total lies, massive corruption, billions going. We find out yesterday, Stacey, what's her name, Adams from, or Abrams, is it
Stacey
from
Abrams from Georgia? Yeah.
Yeah, from Georgia. She made a $2 billion of funding went to her. It's like this is insane. These numbers are so huge. While again, the people that are really leading the effort on the right, which in big part's been the Gateway Pundit, built it up to 5 million hits a day after the election in 2020. We were crushing it because we were sharing the truth. We're fighting to just stay alive. And to not go bankrupt because of various attacks against us, and you got Stacey Abrams making $2 billion. It's so much money, And here's the thing, too, Matt. One last comment here. I worked in the corporate world. I oversaw a $2 billion block of business. It took years to build that up. It was in countries across Asia Pacific. It is so much money. You can't even get your hands around it. There aren't many corporations that even reach $1 billion, let alone in sales, let alone profits. It's such a big deal. And they throw these dollars around like it's nothing. And to such a scoundrel like her, by the way, we did some research on her after the 2020 election, and she was put on these big nonprofits and other entities. There were some entities we even identified that one was a task force. They didn't even call it a nonprofit, but she was on that. Podesta was a big part of all this, and just scoundrels. And here we had Podesta passing out the money for the Green New Deal, right? There was like $700 billion he was passing around. It's so vile what these people are doing while they're throwing January 6ers in prison, or Tina Peters in prison for doing what was right.
Tina Peters, it was, I think, on the 28th of January, my phone's going off at like 5:30 in the morning. It's Steve Bannon calling me, and he's like, "Hey, what's going on with Tina?" He goes, I feel it's just a lot of spinning of wheels. He goes, "You have the authority to speak for me, speak in my name, and get something going." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I'm just a peon, but I will try." So, we had that, I know we invited you to, we had that event up in Great Falls, Virginia. A lot of the coalition there. Patrick Byrne was there. The gentleman who briefed Elon on from what I understand, foreign election interference in the 2020 election, that was briefed to Elon and Trump's team. So they know. And all of that, people, I think, now seeing what's going on, and all of them are referring back to Tina. and how what Tina did was heroic. Tina was, they kept saying the Rosetta Stone, meaning it helped them understand what was going on. And Bannon was frustrated that he, didn't see anything. So I kind of wrote him up a paper. I sent it to him on maybe a couple of different thoughts that the groups were thinking that would be courses of action, because we all care deeply about Tina. We think it's an injustice. The folks who prosecuted her should be in, and she should be on the outside. And I think what we saw is with Tina is a narrative warfare. It wasn't designed to hit her specifically, although she was the target, but it was designed to put the fear of God into any other election official who says, something's not quite right here. And I got a question, and God forbid you do that, because again, as Vance said this morning at CPAC, these people want to make us into androgynous automatons who don't know how to think. We just follow orders.
Wow. Yeah. Brilliant. Brilliant. Maybe we'll see if we can show this right now. Tina, we received word last night that Tina's in solitary confinement. At least it's reported that she got moved to solitaire because they tried to move her out of her cell, and she ends up not wanting to move. She didn't feel safe. Put more in a bigger room with a lot more women, and she didn't like it. And so then they threw her in solitaire, is the report. At the same time, and maybe if you guys can show this piece from joehoft.com, it's about Tina Peters being moved to solitary confinement while her prosecutors tonight in Colorado are at a celebration for their efforts, basically, in imprisoning Tina Peters. The League of Women Voters is given these two prosecutors that were involved in Tina's prosecution. By the way, as you know, Matt, I saw, and I didn't really know this till recently, there was a phone call. Maybe it was in our call a couple of weeks ago. There was a phone call that Christopher Wray and Merrick Garland joined a meeting in Mesa County, years ago, to discuss this issue with Tina Peters. I thought that was outrageous. That tells me that, to me, here's my theory. All this stuff was being ran out of the Biden, either it's the White House or the DOJ, but there was a group, maybe even it's overseas, that was running all these operations. And Tina's was one of them. Not just the criminal operations, but I believe the civil cases as well were ran out of a central hub. And that's why Merrick Garland and Christopher Wray were there, because this was an important case to them. Anyways, Colorado's Attorney General and the individual who was the DA in her county, this guy by the name of Rubenstein, are receiving recognition tonight at this League of Women's Voters event in Colorado. You just, like you said before, everything's upside down. It's outrageous. She's in solitary confinement, and these guys are getting an award and recognition. It's just, you can't even fathom what's going on.
The books say, Joe, I think Christ related near, as we get closer to the end times, good will be pervaded as evil, and evil as good.
It's a great case. Again and again and again under the Biden administration, we were really saved by a quarter of an inch. I saw Trump in a talk last night talk about how dangerous it was for him to run. He knew it was dangerous, and he says, "And my ear still sometimes throbs." And you can look at my ear and you can see that there's some damage there. And he said, "I knew it was going to be dangerous." He said he also knew if he lost, his life would totally change. They were not going to stop. They were going to continue to harass him until they got him in prison for something. And if he lost this latest election, it'd be all over. This country would be done. Communism would be the norm, as well as fascism. Monsters would be ruling the day. The biggest monsters get to rule at the highest levels. And quite frankly, we're not too far from that, are we, Matt? As I look at Congress right now, and I look at these goons, both in the Senate and in the House, and some of these people, I'd say, how could you ever put together such a rotten group of people in one room? And so we're not too far from that right now.
We're not, and it's interesting. Folks say, well, the American people gets what they vote for. And then I follow up now saying, but did we actually vote for these people? We don't
Right.
know. The day after the event there on the 22nd in Great Falls, Virginia, again, the person who briefed Elon, it was a very more technical, detailed brief. I know his engineers talked to these people. Evidently, these were folks who affected the activities on 2020, and they highlighted how they engineered, architected the system. Whether it's you pick the voting machine company, it's the same basic pattern. That there's 14 different entry points, and if they could control two, they could flip. And then he briefed how they presented it to a senator in a runoff in a certain state. There's no longer the senator there, and his jaw
Mm,
dropped to the ground
mm,
when he saw what they were able to do in Coffee County. Showed them how
mm.
it works. So I firmly believe, God, it's God's timing, and it's hard. You can feel frustrated, and you say, God, I know this is going to glorify you in the end, but it seems again, Tina was that Rosetta Stone, that linchpin, and I think when it's all said and done, she is going to be go down in history as somebody who was a true patriot for our country.
Hmm. Yeah, I believe so too. The more we get the truth out, the more we see, and it's all fits together. And that's the thing. The American people need to see the whole big picture. Billions of dollars going overseas. Here's the thing, Matt. There was 50 billion going to US aid every year. 50. And we've probably accounted for five, maybe 10%. Where's the rest of that 45 billion going? And we
Was no,
also know that there were,
I
yeah.
was going to say, I was thinking this. You as an auditor, Joe, if you went to a company that was sending out checks with no categorization or code, you'd be having a conniptions.
Mm. Well, Matt, when I saw that, here's my thinking too, because as you know, I've done audits around the world, and I've overseen big blocks of business and financial reporting. When I saw that, I thought, well, clearly it's intentional. It's you're not going to, and your auditors aren't going to be that dumb, and your management isn't either. And so there was an effort there to make it that way, so that they could do what they were doing. And didn't Elon say something like $4.7 trillion? That's
Trillion, trillion,
untraceable. Trillion.
and I was we
And
had
so,
we had day before yesterday we had David and Stacey Whitehead on. We had them on talking about this, and they talked about how how many years it would take to count $1 trillion, just $1 trillion. This is 4.7 trillion. And Joe, you know what I think this is doing though? It's the American people, and I truly believe this is showing it's no longer the forced dividing of the nation between male, female, Republican, Democrat, gay, straight, black, white, tall, short. They realize if we come together, we're a threat, right? To their power, and it's
mhm.
their illegitimate control of power. So here we now have the American people waking up, and I guess sometimes when I talk to folks, I said everybody can kind of relate to this. In your community, there's that one intersection that is dangerous, and the county commissioners or the mayor, the city council, whatever, they won't put the traffic light up there. Instead, they put a stop sign up first. Then they put the four-way stop sign. Then they put four-way stop signs with the flashing red lights until there's a fatality, and then they put up the traffic light. And I think because sadly, sometimes we have to experience the pain and see it to take action, to come off that comfort point of being lazy or being stuck in our habit patterns or not wanting to see things, right? Because it's just America. This cannot happen here. But once you see it, so we saw it previously with Fast and Furious. We've seen it with elections. Now we see it on a grand scale with the dollars and where it's going, and the collusion and people being yelled at for finding the fraud instead of the fraud themselves. I think the American people are seeing this now, and it's reinforcing this is a we the people issue versus a cabal versus our. It's not an R versus D, left versus right necessarily.
No, I agree, and I've seen that in the media realm as well, for sure, as they separated and divide and conquered all these media outlets. So they go to Infowars, then they go to Gateway Pundit, then they go to whoever, and slowly they're working their way to wipe everyone out. There was one entity that was getting a lot of Facebook traffic after everybody else was shut down because they were happy to share nasty stuff about Trump during his first administration. And they got traffic in Facebook, and then eventually they even got shut down. I thought, well, there you go, guys. There you go. You can continue to play with them because you're going to say nasty things about Trump, and they will pay you for doing that. But eventually it's going to catch up to you. And that's what happened. And Gateway Pundit was one of the first censored off Facebook. Jim actually paid some money, thousands of dollars for advertising on Facebook. And then within a year or two, they shut Jim down, basically, just shut all traffic off to Facebook.
What I love about you guys, Jim and Joe and your brother Jim, and Untamed Nation Media and so forth, is that how the White House has opened up the media pool, right, to now the different forms of media. And hopefully they go back to the executive office building, the old executive office building where Kennedy used to have press conferences when the current media room was the swimming pool. And it's much bigger. You can hold 200 people instead of 60 or so. Is now, I think, not just you all reporting on what the White House is telling you, but you can report on what the other mainstream media is doing and not doing. So now the media has eyes on the media inside that press room. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is. It is great. It's great. And I think about that's actually how we got a lot of traffic in 2016 before the election. See, the left thought there was going to be a landslide for Hillary because they owned legacy media, and that's all the ABCs and all these companies forever. And then we came in with Gateway Pundit and Breitbart and other entities, and we built an environment that matched theirs. And they were shocked by this. They were shocked when Hillary got beat. But we would write about CNN, and we were keeping track of them. Here's a thesis I had in one of the books I wrote. We were keeping track of CNN. We were watching what they were reporting, and we would report on what they reported and laugh at them for how insane and untrue their remarks or their stories were. We made fun of them, and they didn't look at our stuff. They never shared it. Rarely ever would they share any of our stories because it was true. And so we had the advantage of reporting on their message and reporting on ours, and they only reported on their message. And eventually we won. And then they started to call us fake news, and President Trump immediately twisted that name and threw it back on them, and it has stuck. It is fake news, the mainstream media. Now we know, though, Matt, and the thing that I can't even tell you, it angers me so much, is to see, even as you mentioned in this White House press room now, you may have AP who's been kicked out, thank God, because God knows how much money they've been getting from one of these government entities. But Reuters gets 300 million, or the New York Times gets 30 million, or Politico 30 million. They're walking into that room. They can pay their representatives, big salaries to be there. It's an exquisite, position, and because they're getting funded by the government, by the communists in our government. Whereas we send people there, they're not making nearly the same amount of money because they've done such an incredible job attacking us and our advertisers, et cetera. So I would love to see the Trump administration even it up. Okay, if these guys
I'd love to see a mantra,
pay conservatives.
Right? The progressives always talk about separation of church and state, which is nowhere in the Constitution. So separation of church.
Right.
It just you don't have an official religion. Period. That's it. No problem. I would love to see the mantra separation of media and state. That's what needs to happen. Separation of media and state. And to that point, the way the press reported on Tina, the mainstream media, or lack thereof, what I found interestingly is that Professor Clements had come in to where we were in Great Falls on the 22nd, and we had conversations with a group of folks till about 3:00 in the morning, and then into the next day we slept and got up and continued talking. But it was I was amazed at how many people, with the ebullience of most of the J6ers being pardoned, they thought Tina was part of that release, right? That J6 release, or they thought that with all the pardons Trump was issuing, Tina was pardoned, and the average man and woman in the country didn't realize that she's not a J6er per se, and Trump doesn't have the constitutional authority to pardon her because it's a state issue. So part of what I know uh, uh, Joe Altman and the folks here at Untamed Media did was with that Tina Day 2 Saturdays ago was help educate the people that no, she's still there. She great things happened, but she wasn't part of those two groups of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she came on my show actually one day and said, "Joe, this is going to be the most important thing I'm sharing and maybe ever shared." And she talked about the supremacy clause. She had to dial me 3 times because after 15 minutes she'd get kicked off, and she'd have to dial back. But she laid all this down, and I've talked to top level attorneys about it, and they've said, "Yeah, she's right. The supremacy clause is in the U.S. Constitution that basically says federal laws trump state." And the fact that those prosecutors who are getting an award tonight in Colorado didn't consider the supremacy clause and Tina's duty to perform what she did, which was protect the data from the election, the fact that they wouldn't recognize that and move forward and prosecute her, to me was it was terrible. It was blatant ignorance. It was intentional, and it's clear these people getting the awards tonight, they're the ones that like you said, it's an upside down world. Who are the real criminals here? Hey, I wanted to mention a couple stories with you. You mentioned January 6th. Well, one story that came up overnight, Jake Lang was in. He was at CPAC and he got kicked out, and we haven't received a reason why. And he brought like 20 people with him. He's going to all these January 6ers he paid to get there and everything. And I understand there wasn't a reason for why he was kicked out. So that's on video. I'm going to be sharing that in the next show. I just want to mention that he's going to join me today,
because
actually.
I saw that, and then I saw, on Bannon's show this morning, there were a lot of J6ers in there, and Bannon wants to get them involved with prison reform. So there was a bunch of J6ers. So it seems that some were allowed in and some weren't for some reason.
Yeah, it was a bizarre story. So anyways, Jake will be on my show here in a little bit, and we'll be talking about that on the Joe Hoft show. Another individual I wanted to bring to your attention is a guy by the name of Kim Sorgenti, and maybe you can share this article as well as I mentioned and talk about Kim. It's please help this January 6th, Kim Sorgenti. I put this up this morning at joehoft.com. Kim was in California back in December of 2020. I'm not sure if you know his story. In December, he protested on a corner with some other individuals the stolen election. And so they're protesting. And while they're out there, these 3 goons show up. One of them's here in this picture. You'll see the guy in the black. He's got actually brass knuckles on his right hand there. You can see it. We've got video and pictures of him. He's got brass knuckles on. He's a gangbanger, and he assaulted Kim and some others. That's Kim holding the megaphone. Kim used that to defend himself against this gangbanger. And there was no police charges that day. One of these guys hit one of the lady in the back. It was it looked like the crowd, the pictures I've seen, the video is maybe 20 or so people. So what happens is Kim then a few weeks later goes to January 6th. Kim is there. He saw Roseanne Boylan get killed. He was begging the police. He says, "I lost all my dignity," got on my knees and cried and said, "Please stop." Like so many of these guys around that area were saying, "Stop. She's dying." And I believe anybody in that situation has the right to do whatever they can to save her life. And some of these guys then got sentenced really harshly because maybe they threw something at the cops or did something to tell them to stop. And Kim was there. He didn't do anything. He gets up. Finally, he just realizes she's dead. And he stands up, and this cop that was standing there, he was begging. He turns his back to him. The cop cracks him in the back of the head. Blood's going down the back of his head and the front of his head, as he was there trying to stop this madness in a massive crowd there. It was just horrible. He comes back to California, goes back after January 6th, after that experience, obviously post-traumatic stress disorder. And what happens then in March is they indict him for this incident in Orange County that I just showed you the picture of, where the gangbangers coming after him with brass knuckles. They arrest Kim, and say that he was guilty of assaulting somebody with a deadly weapon. Kim's deadly weapon is that megaphone. Months later, they arrest him for January 6th. Recently, the Trump pardons all the January 6ers, and his case was dismissed. But he couldn't really celebrate because this case in Orange County is still ongoing. And so now he's going to court in Orange County. He went last month, and now he's got to go tomorrow. And he's hoping to get this thing dismissed. But I've shared this with some other people. We got to get the word out tomorrow morning. People get there, support this guy. Last time, a month ago, 20 people showed up. And when he stood up, these 20 people all stood up together to show to the judge that they're behind this guy. And then he actually stepped outside. I connected him with Steve Bannon. He's talking to Bannon outside. Bannon said, call me. And then Kim says, hey, the prosecutor's here. So Bannon said, put me on the phone. And the prosecutor about fell over when he realized Kim was talking to Steve Bannon. Kim's been living in his car. He's broke. He's busted. His wife and kids left him. He's been in a real dire situation, like many of these January 6ers after they went through what they went through. A lot of these guys didn't have a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of money to protect yourself, as you know. So anyways, that case was then postponed till tomorrow. We're hoping that they dismiss this. But here's another January 6er still being persecuted.
I'll send that. I think you know who I'm talking about, but there's a lady that dear friends with. She's got like a media type of company there, and she lives in Huntington Beach, California, Orange County.
Okay, great.
And I'll send it to her because she's I was over there with her before, and everybody there knows her. That we like. She's the mayor of the place. I mean, she's not the mayor, but she's that well known. Just a wonderful lady. I know she and I helped Lynn Patton with some fundraisers for Trump and SoCal a couple of years ago. So I'll send that to her to maybe get that awareness up locally there in Orange County.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. If you don't mind, I'd like to share one more story with you, and I've been writing about this. So I was writing about Andrew Weissman back during the Russia collusion years, and I started realizing early on, this guy should recuse himself. The stuff he said in the auditing world, you got to recuse yourself. You can't. We've done that. We've recused people from positions in audits because they had their wife worked in another department at the company they were at. We're not going to mess with even an appearance of a conflict of interest. So then I saw Weissman and all these guys that joined the Mueller gang. They all were corrupt as hell. So that I started writing about Weissman, and this guy here in this picture, you can see the guy in the middle. He's an Italian guy. Back in the 1990s, he was prosecuted for murder in New York. He was with the mafia, and there was a big effort to arrest these people in the mafia at that time. He and another gentleman who was much older than him, they're both still alive. In this picture, and his name is Michael Sessa. In this picture, he's probably 31 or 2. They charged him with murder. He turned himself in because he knew he didn't do it. And what happened was they threw him in jail right away. So he's been in jail now 33 years, or more than half his life. And they accused him of this murder. The problem is, and if you go down in this piece, you'll see the real murderer, the real guy that many of these people, at least in the mob, knew who killed this guy, was this mafia hitman. And the mafia hitman was brought in actually as one of the individuals that they questioned as to whether he was involved in the murder of this individual. What happened was there's the mobster that was the hitman. Looks like a real nice guy, doesn't he? Well, what happened is
character, yeah.
You done it? Yeah, really something else. Well, they say in this one piece, and David Schoen, the attorney, has been trying to help Michael for years, as well as Sarah Carter wrote a piece about his situation. This guy here was the key witness. And the prosecutor, by the name of Andrew Weissman, in his early days in New York, in East New York, said to the judge, we can't tell you who our witness is, but he's legitimate. He's a great witness. But if we told you his name, we'd have to we'd have to, he might get killed, So we've got to protect his identity. It turns out that they identified who this guy was after Sessa was imprisoned. Another group of people, 4 people, got off because they found out who the witness was. It's this hitman. And this piece here, you can see Weissman actually was admonished by a judge by name for his actions in this. He obstructed justice. He didn't tell Michael Sessa or his attorney or the defense people or the judge who the real witness was. They didn't find it out till later. And Michael's been fighting for his freedom ever since. Now, he's been sitting in prison for 33 years because his prosecutor, Andrew Weissman, lied to the court, lied to his attorneys, and obstructed justice by not providing the information on who was his witness. Michael's been trying to get pardons for years. He's been there 33 years, third of a century, more than half his life. Now, David Schoen's been fighting for him, Sarah Carter, myself. He reached out to me. I've been pushing him. Roger Stone's been trying to get him a pardon. This guy was imprisoned by one of the most corrupt actors in U.S. history in our DOJ, Andrew Weissman, who went on to do all sorts of nasty things during the Enron days. He and Christopher Wray and Mueller were all involved in that Enron case where they abused people and shut down Arthur Andersen. 80,000 people lost their jobs. Then, of course, as you know, he and Mueller take over the Mueller gang, and the crimes they committed against President Trump are really staggering and unprecedented. This is the monster in his early years. 30 years ago was doing the same stuff. And when you allow these people to continue to do what they're doing and don't hold them accountable, they just keep doing it. And that's the story about Michael Sessa.
And I think, I again was watching a little bit of War Room this morning, and I saw the J6ers talking about how I think Cash is confirmed now, which is good. McConnell's retiring. It's like Christmas Day. It's wonderful. But they said we have to expose this dark underbelly in DOJ, the BOP, the FBI, and it's interesting when you highlighted that. I remember going back to a Fast and Furious related issue. There was it was in the summer of 2011 in a federal courtroom where they had Jesus Vicente Zambada Nibla. He was the number 4 guy for the Sinaloa cartel, and he was extradited for drug charges, simple drug charges. He was running drugs into predominantly Denver and Chicago. Wonder why that is. Obama very instrumental in Denver and Chicago. And when he got up to talk to the judge, he said, "Judge, you don't understand. Fast and Furious is not what you think it is. It's you all were helping us run drugs and weapons into this country. You're helping us to run drugs here. You were helping us to avoid law enforcement in Mexico and the U.S. The U.S. government, you were doing this." And it's written in papers at the time. I think it was in the Chicago federal courtroom, and the assistant U.S. attorneys there get I guess white paper, and they call for a recess, and they come back the next day and drop the national security card on somebody who was just extradited for running drugs. That guy disappeared from the system and never appeared again until as a witness against El Chapo. So it's what did Bill Murray say? If you lie to the government, it's a felony. If the government lies to you, it's politics.
Absolutely, and we're seeing it. Like never before. But the remedy, I believe, is sunlight, and that's why they come after us.
And that's what the J6ers who were all there talking to Bannon. And these guys hardly did anything, and they're like in mediums and medium highs. And one lady had 0 points. She should have been, as Bannon saying, you should be in a camp. They're in a medium and medium high. Bannon was in a low for a misdemeanor for 4 months, and he's in a low, for God's sakes. But what they all wanted, they said, what we want accountability and we want justice. That's all they want, accountability and justice.
That's it. That's what we all want. And again, look what happens when we don't get it. Look what happens. You get an Andrew Weissman, and apparently Michael Sessa is telling me he wasn't the only one there. Loretta Lynch was part of that gang in New York. So was James Comey. All these individuals, this Judge Gleason, who was the special judge that came in and Judge Solomon brought in the General Flynn case. That judge, he was part of that gang too in New York back in the 1990s. All these nasty, nasty people elevated themselves to the top of the DOJ and totally, made it hell. Of course, Obama had a little bit to do with that as well. Well, and quite frankly, these guys were given high positions under Bush. So, anyways, we've got to address these people. We've got to put them put them away, and never let them ever in a position like of authority ever again. I think these people need to be held to a higher level standard, and therefore put away for a very, very long time, if not worse. Quite frankly, if it's treason.
I think so too. I mean, it's like even going biblically. You go back to pastors, and there's I'm not a pastor certainly, but I'm paraphrasing. Essentially, if you're a leader, like you're a pastor, and you know better, and you're intentionally doing something wrong to your flock, woe unto you. And I'd say that for folks in our government, especially in the law, the DOJ, and so forth, you know better. You're supposed to be an arbiter of justice, not for convictions, but of justice. And if you manipulate it, because let's be frank, they get promoted, they get bonuses, they get raises on conviction rates, not veracity rates, and that needs to change.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's maybe the theme of this entire discussion. Woe unto you, to all these people that have hurt this country and hurt so many people, even killed them. Woe unto you. Matt, we're going to have to go. Thanks so much for joining me. It's a great discussion. We could talk for hours, man, but really appreciate you being here.
Joe, thank you. And thank you, and thanks for what Untamed Nation does. I mean, great work, and thank you so much.
Appreciate it, buddy. Take care. Have a great rest of the day. We'll catch up soon. Anytime.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks for sitting in and listening to us here on Let My Tina Go US. There's a reminder of that. You can go out there and to that website and gain more information on Tina Peters and her current situation. Again, there's prosecutors getting an award tonight while Tina sits in solitary. We need to fix this. We need to fix this fast. This is outrageous. God bless you. Thanks for being here. We'll catch up again with you soon.
Hi, Tina Peters here.
See, today they come after you if you're investigating.
Yeah.
That would have